Good evening and welcome to another episode of Dana Being Dana. I am your host, Dana Michelle, and it is show 97. Last week we were in studio and we talked about the Homecoming Challenge and we featured Spell House couples, which was such a fun show. So please check that out if you haven't had a chance to. The Homecoming Challenge, and that is our nonprofit in its entirety, is airing currently on Naperville Community Television, nctv17.com. Please check that out as well. But today, we are talking about a very important topic. I really appreciate all of the feedback from the listeners who have been watching and following some of our marketing. Diabetes on Dana Being Dana, it's such a prevalent disease. I think it's quadrupled, I think, according to the World Health Organization since the 1980s in terms of people who are diagnosed. And so I have invited some very close and important friends and family to join me today on the show. Would you like to introduce yourself? Should we start with you, Mom?
I'm Dana's mom, Gwendolyn Brown.
I'm so happy you're here. Thank you, Mom.
You're welcome. So glad to be here.
Yes.
I'm Dr. Avnivora. I'm an endocrinologist who specializes in diabetes management.
Real quick, can you just tell us what an endocrinologist is?
So endocrinology sort of is the specialty in looking at hormones, and insulin, which is the hormone that actually controls your blood sugar, is one of the ones we focus on. But there are a lot of other hormones that we look at, hormones that come from your thyroid gland, your adrenal gland, your ovaries, your testes. So we focus on all the different hormones that are produced by what we call the endocrine glands in the body.
All right. People who are diagnosed with diabetes often see an endocrinologist or as a specialist.
That's correct.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being here. Thank you to be the specialist on this show. Thank you so much for joining me. Mark?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. What's up? It's me, Dr. G, Dr. Mark Gomez. I'm a board-certified internal medicine physician, and we see diabetes. I see diabetes on a daily basis, and my goal as a primary care physician is to make sure not only do we diagnose you properly and certainly as fast and accurately as possible, but also to really talk about the treatment strategies that are there to make sure that people that have diabetes have better control of their disease burden, and also to, at the end of the day, let them live a healthy and active lifestyle.
That's awesome.
So it's all about the prevention.
Thank you so much for being here. And you are also a host. You have a sister brother show on, I started to say sister show, but then that's weird. You have a brother show, brother show on IntellectualRadio.com. Tell them about your show.
Yeah, so my show is called To Your Health with Dr. G. It's a weekly broadcast here on Intellectual Radio, also on Facebook Live. And it's really a show about connecting leading experts on a health topic. We talk about it in simple terms, make sure that people out there, that they hear the information from their doctor or their certified clinician, and giving people the tools to live active and healthy lifestyles. So we tell the truth when it comes to your health, and then hopefully people get motivated and engage and talk to their physicians.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're part of the Wednesday crew too. You're your shows ago. I'm glad you came back and joined us.
Hey, thank you, Dana.
Chef Tim.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? It's Chef Tim. Let's see. For me, for diabetes, seeing it run rampant in my family, seeing Big Mama and them die early, seeing a lot of my family be morbidly obese. As a chef, I kind of made it my goal to steer people more towards plant-based eating more healthier, eating more natural, and also just getting people to live a healthier, longer life. So
that's awesome. Yeah. I appreciate you being here because I think diet is such an important part of diabetes and managing diabetes. So it was a no-brainer to have a Chef Tim, joining us for the show. Danielle?
Good evening. My name is Danielle McCain, and I am the parent of a child with type 1 diabetes. So I'm here to really raise awareness about type 1. Most folks are familiar with type 2, and also just give a parent perspective to the panel.
That's awesome. And how old is your kiddo?
My daughter is 6. She'll be 7 in October.
Great. And we're going to get to her story shortly. Uncle Linwood, how are you?
Great. I'm Linwood Hilton. I'm Dana's favorite uncle.
Yes.
I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I do everything I can to control it as best I know how.
That's awesome. And where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Stone Mountain, Georgia.
Fantastic. I appreciate you joining me. And I hope my other favorite uncle's sharing the show. That'd be great. Brian?
Hey, I'm Brian Hilton. I'm Dana's favorite cousin. I am a third generation diabetic from what I know of so far. I am also type 2 diabetic, and I hail from Houston, Texas now.
Thank you so much for both of you guys calling in. As you can see, with so many of my family who are impacted by diabetes, it was such an important show, an important topic for me to talk about. Dr. Avni, do you want to talk about because we mentioned this kind of in our pre-meeting, you talked about the genetic connection with respect to type 2 versus type 1?
Sure. When we're talking about type 1 versus type 1 is what we would the cells that make insulin in the pancreas. So people who have type 1 diabetes don't make insulin and they need to have insulin to control their blood sugars. Whereas type 2 is more about insulin resistance, meaning you make insulin, it just doesn't work as well as it should. And generally speaking, type 2 tends to run in families. You see it much more commonly when you if someone in their family has diabetes. If they have type 2, there tends to be multiple people in the family that have diabetes. Whereas type 1 can run in families, but it is more common to be random, where you may not have any family members that have diabetes in the family.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Please share the show. If you have any questions, we're following along as well, and we can answer some of those questions if you write them in the chat box. Danielle, can we start with you?
Sure.
Can we talk about your episodic event with your daughter and how you discovered that she had type 1? And this has been fairly recent, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
She was diagnosed last year, October of 2018, just 3 days shy of her 6th birthday. We noticed a series of symptoms, what we now know as symptoms, over a 2-week period. It started with her being super thirsty and really wanting water, which was unusual for her. And then she would use the bathroom a lot. There was a period when she was very kind of disoriented at times. Late at night, she'd wake up and be just kind of out of sorts. And then into that 2nd week, we noticed that she was lethargic and started to lose some weight. At that point, I did some research online to just see what was going on. And then the final episode was the Saturday before her birthday. She got up, we were getting ready to do some birthday things, and I talked to her about it, and then she started playing, and I started cleaning around the house and doing stuff like that. And then I came back up about half hour later, and she was in bed asleep. It's completely unusual on a Saturday morning. She's up playing, running around, especially on a birthday weekend. At that point, we called the doctor, and the doctor said, I told her what was happening, and the doctor told us to go to the ER to prepare to stay, and that she thought Ella had type 1 diabetes.
Really?
Yes.
And so, okay, we'll come back to that. Mom, do you want to talk about when you discovered that you had diabetes?
Well, it was in 2000, after 2002. In 1990, I had been diagnosed with MS, and the symptoms are similar. The tingling, being tired, being, off balance, disoriented, and, very tired. So I went in and I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes.
Okay. Uncle Linwood?
I discovered I was a diabetic about 20 years ago. I was the business manager for Morehouse Medical Associates. I had gone to eat lunch, and when I came back from lunch, I had this extreme sense that I had to go to the bathroom, and it was so urgent I didn't think I was going to make it. So I ran in the bathroom, I made it.
Okay,
45 minutes later, I had to go to the bathroom again with the same sense of urgency.
Did you make it that time?
I made it every time.
Good.
And after that, I said, well, it's a Friday afternoon. I'll just go into the physician practice, the family practice group, and let them treat me for this bladder infection. They They took a blood sample. They tested my glucose levels. They said, Mr. Hilton, we're going to put you in the hospital until we can control your glucose level because you're above 4. I think I was 489. They said, we're going to put you in the hospital so we can bring your glucose levels down. I had never envisioned that I was a diabetic. I couldn't even conceive it. I said, that doesn't make a bit of sense. I'm getting ready to go home. They said, we can't release you, so I got to call the medical director. So they called the medical director, who was a friend of mine, and she said, well, put Mr. Hilton on the phone. I got on the phone. She said, Linwood, I understand that you do not want to go into the hospital. If you don't want to go into the hospital, I want you to get you a gallon of water and try to drink it as fast as you can. That'll bring your glucose levels down. And if it brings your glucose levels down, don't eat any carbs and go see your physician on Monday. She said, but you need to control this. I told her, I can't drink a gallon of water. She said, okay. She said, well, give me Deborah's number, who was my wife at the time. She said, give me Deborah's number. I said, what? She said, yeah, give me Deborah's number because if you die over the weekend, Deborah might want to go back to Seattle as opposed to paying the house off.
Okay.
Then I got it.
Got it. That it was.
And so after that, I started doing, I had my ups, my downs. My diabetes got out of control to the point where I had to take a insulin at night. My medications, pills, they continue to grow. And currently, I'm now on, I was taking 18 units of insulin at night. And now I'm taking no insulin. I'm taking a minimum amount of medications, but I'm retired, less stress, and I exercise more.
Yep, we're going to talk more about those preventative measures in a bit. Brian, can you tell us about your episodic incident and when you were diagnosed?
I believe it was around 2005, 2006, something of that nature. I was working 2 jobs, one of them being sales, which you know is stressful, and another one being kind of like an overnight graveyard deal. I was doing monster drinks, trying to keep myself up because I was working so much. And I was getting all the signs, like the lady stated before, of all the symptoms, but I was ignoring it because I was a guy that was scared to go to the doctor. You know how that goes. So I remember I was getting like my vision just up and left. Like I couldn't see much. So I'm not a guy that wears glasses, but I call all my friends who wear glasses like, hey, did your vision just go? Like, what's happening here?
Like 1 minute you can see and the next minute you can't.
Yeah. Like I couldn't even see anything on a menu. Like this ain't supposed to be.
Right.
But I figured it was because of the energy drink. So, let me wash my system out by doing a whole bunch of water. So I started doing a whole bunch of water, not knowing that it was the parched, mouth that was another sign of diabetes. Well, then that turned into constantly using the bathroom, which is another sign of diabetes. So all these things that I was kind of like trying to clear myself were actually the signs of actually being a diabetic. And then one day it was just, my heart was just beating so fast. I was like, let me just go ahead and get myself checked out. I go into the doctor, they take my blood sugar. Well, they asked me, why are you here? And I said, well, again, I'm a 3rd generation, could be diabetes, etc. They take my blood sugar and they said, son, how did you get here? And that's when I knew it was a problem. So they read my blood sugars. It was something like 500. They put me on some medicine. They did the scare tactic with me, and I've been managing it ever since.
You both talked about your glucose levels, and before we forget, did you made it to the bathroom? Okay, you're okay as well.
Yeah.
Out here winning.
Yeah, no depends. We're good.
That's my family out here winning. They talked about their glucose levels being dangerously high. Can you give us an idea of what a normal glucose level looks like?
So when we see from at least the statistics standpoint, we like to have the blood sugar, as far as the criteria for diagnosis of diabetes, we talk about certainly there's a couple different tests you can look at. One being the fasting glucose, and traditionally diabetes is diagnosed if you have a fasting blood sugar higher than 126. Usually we try to do it on multiple occasions. Probably more favorable, although probably more talked about now, is the A1C test, which has been around, called hemoglobin A1C. That diagnosis is traditionally 6.5% or higher. And then, of course, when you always kind of see there's a phase in between where somebody either has a blood sugar between 100 and 126. We kind of call that impaired fasting glucose, or if somebody has an A1C test between 5.7 and 6.4, which we call prediabetes. Interesting thing is that when I see a lot of the diagnosis, a lot of it, I might see people early on, so they may not have many symptoms at all, except for a little bit of lethargy. What's common, what I'll see is I'll just do a test, and then they'll say that they're high, or I'll have that 5 o'clock patient on a Friday where they're coming in with some of the symptoms like these gentlemen have said, with the excess urination. They think it might be a bladder infection, and I run a quick urine dip in the office, and I say, well, I got two news to tell you, two good things. Number one, you don't have an infection. Number two, there's nothing but glucose on the sample. So at that point, they've already been beyond that point. Wow. Normally, you're not supposed to be putting sugar in the urine unless we give you a medication for diabetes, which one medicine, a class of medicines will put sugar in the urine.
Now, you said A1C. Can you talk about what that means?
So the A1C measures the average blood sugar over the last 3 months. So, for example, an A1C of about 7, which is sort of our general goal, we want the A1C below 7, means about an average blood sugar of 150. One thing to kind of keep in mind is an average, meaning you can have a blood sugar of 200 and a blood sugar of 50, and it'll average out to somewhere in between. And that doesn't mean that you have good blood glucose control. So A1C is a helpful marker in determining what a patient's general control is, but really you get a lot more information by checking the blood glucose levels. The other thing to be aware of is that sometimes A1C may not be accurate in some patients. So somebody who has chronic kidney disease or has a blood disorder such as anemia, sickle cell anemia, thalassemia, sometimes the A1C levels are not reliable. So in the end, we're kind of, while the A1C is a helpful tool, we really pay attention a lot to the point of care glucose testing, the when you kind of poke your finger to check your blood sugar, because that really gives us the full picture.
One type of diabetes that I wanted to mention just briefly is gestational diabetes. Can you just talk about what that is?
So gestational diabetes is something that develops during pregnancy. Because we make a lot of hormones in pregnancy, estrogen, progesterone, we have an increase in what we call our insulin resistance. And what that means is that you need more insulin produced by your body to control your blood sugars. So women who may not have diabetes otherwise, because they're pregnant and they have a lot of these hormones, develop more insulin resistance. So usually in about the 28th week of pregnancy, we do a glucose tolerance test. And for women who've been pregnant, you kind of know you drink that really
nasty,
sticky, sugary
nasty
stuff, 75 grams of glucose, and they test your sugar at 1 hour. And if you fail that, then they do a 3-hour test where they test you at 3 hours. And basically, the reason we make such a big fuss about this is that when you have high glucose levels in pregnancy, there can be more problems, more complications with the pregnancy. So you can have problems with the baby getting too big. When the baby's born, the baby can have low blood sugar. So there's, so actually our goals for blood sugar are much stricter in pregnancy than not in pregnancy. So we talk about an A1C of 7 when you have diabetes. We talk about an A1C of 6 in pregnancy. Okay. So, and people who have gestational diabetes have about a 40% lifetime risk of developing diabetes later in life.
Is it true they say that the causes and the reasons for diabetes in type 2 can generally be preventable or managed?
Yeah, so I'll give you a quick statistic. This is from the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, back in 2005. They published data that said if we just do few things, if we actually just exercise, have a healthier diet, and quit smoking tobacco, we can prevent 80% of diabetes. Now we're looking at type 2 diabetes typically, but we're looking at the rise of chronic disease burden in this country. But we say diabetes, when you're talking about type 2, is pretty much a preventable disease. Type 1's a different story.
Right. And my question was, while type 2 is typically preventable, is it true that type 1 and the causes and the risk factors for type 1 are generally unknown?
Yes, that's true. So I think there's a lot of research going on in that arena. People are looking at siblings, they have patients with type 1 and they're following the siblings and seeing if any of them develop type 1 and looking for genetic associations. There's research going on into are there viruses or something that trigger type 1. But the reality is, we don't really have a good grasp on what the underlying cause for type 1 diabetes is.
What is it about, what is it that makes sugars go up? And you can talk about food, because a lot of food that I think people don't understand actually when it's broken down in the body becomes sugar, right? Everybody thinks it's like donuts and cakes and pies, but that isn't necessarily the case.
So when you look at sugar in food, you made actually a great point. A lot of people don't understand that things that we eat, sugar is disguised in. Like if you have certain processed meats, they have sugar in them. If you drink certain fruit juices, they have higher amounts of sugar in them. High fructose corn syrup. I mean, there are many different levels to them, and I mean, my mom went to her doctor, and he broke down to her like even people who eat too much fruit at times, because everything is supposed to be in moderation, and a little bit of this, a little bit of your grains, and so forth and so on. And I just went plant-based, I want to say about 2 years ago. And once you just start looking at the label and everything, I mean, chips, bread, I mean, sometimes even coffees can have certain sugars in them that are flavored. Even the ingredients that we use, I had to really kind of like look at them and say, hey, you know what? We got to cut back on this, because it was at a point myself, I was like 398. And so over the next year, I just I went plant-based. I started fasting more. I started working out. I lost about 140 pounds.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So just plenty of water and just like getting my body right, because I didn't want to die. I didn't want to sit there and I couldn't run with my kids. I couldn't, I couldn't walk right. It was just like, I felt like I was in prison in my own body. Mm-hmm. And so I just did things like, more vegetables, less fruit. I mean, not less fruit, excuse me, fruit in like smaller portions, not just sitting there eating things that are very sugary, and like certain fruits have a very, very high sugar in them. And
like
then,
what? Can you give us an example?
Like say for instance, pineapples sometimes can have high sugar in them.
Right.
So if you have it naturally, it's okay. But if you have it in like the Dole's can with the fruit juice in that, and you don't know if that's a natural fruit juice or if it's a cane sugar or if it's high fructose corn syrup, which is just horrible for the body itself. And so a lot of people, they sit there and they'll give their kids this stuff. They give their kids Cheetos and cereals, and I mean, just left and right. And then even McDonald's puts sugars in its fries, just and
I'm sorry to inform you all. Maybe we should have a disclaimer on this show about people having negative reactions to finding out that there's sugar in McDonald's.
Yeah, I mean, but like
in their fries.
I'm so but it's just like
graphic content.
It's just you don't really understand until you say, okay, it's my own life. I need to just look at what I'm eating when I put it in my system. Even people who do things like the seltzer waters or whatever, it's like it's sugar in almost everything, and it's not always going to be called sugar. That's why I tell people when you eat natural, you know what you're eating. But when you eat unnatural and processed foods, that's when it's like it's masked, and then it comes in on like other ingredients as well.
One of the things I wanted to mention was, when there's sometimes what I see with my patients is when we look at the labels, they're looking at the sugars, but really what we need to be looking at is the carbohydrates, because the carbohydrates are what raise the blood sugar. So sometimes we're only looking at sugars, which is kind of a sub. All sugar is carbohydrates, but all carbohydrates raise blood sugars. And it's not just sweets, the savory carbs, the breads, the pastas, the potatoes. Those are things that we also have to pay attention to in terms of portion control and how much of it we're eating.
That's right.
We're talking about food, and I'm starting to get hungry. What is some food? And Brian, you mentioned your monster drinks. What's some of the food that you've changed or that you've identified? Because we all have our vices, right? What's food that you've either cut back on or you've realized go ahead.
I was never a sweet person. I was a chip person. So potato chips and because I would just do snack food. I was very athletic, young.
Yeah.
I ate pretty healthy, but I would have that occasional junk food. And when I say junk food, not all just sweet tooths, but again, the potato chips, the just things that you don't identify them as sweet, but they break down to be sugars. That was
my weakness. I love white rice. I love the bread. I love the potatoes. Like, that was my guilty behavior. And those were the worst for me. So I never really had a problem with that. Now, again, my daughter, and again, I think of being the third generation, with her, I'm very, cautious, like, hey, let's go easy on trick-or-treat Halloween, because she loves candy. So, for her, I'm trying to watch out for the sweets as well as the carbs, because, again, she's going to be a kid. I'm a kid at heart, at times. But at the same token, it is right. Like, you have to just watch what you eat and understand that everything does have sugar. It breaks down to it, and just manage it, accordingly. So that's something that we talk, or every diabetic will talk to their doctor about, saying, this is what you should eat, this is what you shouldn't eat, and you just got to stick to it.
Anybody else?
So Dana, I like to say that. I just want to say, glucose is an essential thing. It's our primary fuel source as humans. We need it. Okay. The issue that we're talking about here with diabetes is that there is a disorder in the carbohydrate metabolism, but the disorder with the insulin level. At the end of the day, your sugar needs to leave blood and go into a tissue that's asking for that energy source, whether it's skeletal muscle, whether it's your reading, whatever. Bottom line is that sugar's got to leave the blood and physically go into a tissue that's asking for the energy. Then that cell will then utilize it for energy. Our goal from physicians is when we stick a needle in you, of course, we want to see less sugar in that needle.
Right.
And so I want to tell people that at the end of the day, we still need, sugar gets a bad rap. But in this context, but we still have to realize that it's an essential human necessity as we approach our day to day.
Right. So going back to the foods, anybody else want to talk about?
So for my daughter, we really haven't eliminated anything. The doctors have told us it's important for her to have a balanced diet. Again, she is insulin dependent, so how food works with her is a little bit different from from type 2, in that we spend our time counting carbs. That's what we do majority of the time with every meal, to determine how much insulin she should get to be able to process the food that she's eating. So the only thing that we really pay close attention to is like juice. Like for a kid, juice is a big deal. So she has thankfully been comfortable with us transitioning to water. Most of the time, we give her some juice sometime. Again, we don't deprive her, but we're just very watchful over what she's having and the portions that she's having.
How's that
particularly
impacted
with carbs?
How's that impacted your family diet?
Well, we try to eat more healthy overall, just to prevent all of us from, my father has type 2, my husband's father has type 2. So it was on our radar anyway. So we just try to eat more healthy and support her. We're very conscious of carbs now, more than we ever were before. The doctor was saying, a lot of folks are thinking about sugar and, cakes and cookies and candy and so on, but it's really the carbs in breads and rice and all that type of stuff that we really pay more attention to. And again, we have to count carbs. So for our family, we're reading labels, trying to figure out how many carbs and what her carb to insulin ratio is as it relates to, what she's eating. So my math skills aren't great, but they've gotten a lot better.
Linwood, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say something. I have eliminated things like, I'm not even going to say I've eliminated. I've reduced my intake of things like alcohol. I've eliminated all artificial sweeteners out of my diet completely, because that has a negative effect on your body. I try to control portion size, and because I'm now 67 years old, I try to control portion size because my metabolism has slowed down. It's more than just diabetes. It's just controlling my weight. I've eliminated grapes. I hardly ever touch grapes because of the sugar content. But I still eat watermelon. I still eat peaches, et cetera, et cetera. I just eat them in moderation.
Can't give up that watermelon.
Can't give up that alcohol.
Ooh-wee. How does weight affect diabetes?
So really what the main crux of it is that the higher your weight, the worse your insulin resistance. So often what happens with people with type 2 diabetes is that they've had insulin resistance for a while. And the pancreas is working hard to keep up with that insulin resistance. So it's making a lot of insulin to keep the blood sugars under control. And by the time they develop type 2 diabetes, actually some of their pancreas has already started to burn out a little bit just from the hard work of trying to keep up with that insulin resistance. Now, some of that insulin resistance is related to weight. And so certainly you can reduce your risk of developing type 2 diabetes by keeping your weight under control. And we have people who develop type 2 diabetes and lose a significant amount of weight and often are off medications for their diabetes. The other thing is that there is obviously a significant genetic component. Generally, if you have a parent with type 1 diabetes, you have a 50% chance of developing diabetes in your lifetime. So you're already at high risk with the genetics. So the combination of the genetics with the lifestyle are what sort of set you up for developing diabetes. So the weight management is important. And we actually have new medications for diabetes that actually help with weight loss. And so sometimes those medicines, if they help you with weight loss, allow you to eliminate other medications.
Now, while you can reduce the impact of diabetes, is it curable? I know some people have reduced like medications that they're taking. My Uncle Linwood said that, and there's I think some people can rarely experience symptoms, but I think some people think that you can eliminate diabetes. Is that true? Or once you're diagnosed, do you always carry that diagnosis depending on how you manage it?
I think it's a little bit of a matter of semantics.
Definitely.
What I will sometimes call it as diet controlled type 2 diabetes, because, in the end, even if you lose a lot of weight and you get off medications, it's something that you have to stay vigilant about. And so, we still recommend that you have at least an annual A1C done with your primary care doctor to ensure that the sugars are not coming up, because some people don't have symptoms. As far as type 1, we don't really have a cure, and there's a lot of work being done to try to see if we can find a cure. But that's type 1 diabetes is a very different beast from type 2. As you were talking about, people with type 1 aren't necessarily overweight. They're not necessarily eating enough too many carbs. It's just that they don't have enough insulin to cover their carbohydrates. And so it's a very different. Now, people with type 1 can certainly develop insulin resistance with weight gain, and they may need more insulin. But again, it's a different disease.
So, Dana, I was going to say, depends on the eyes of the insurance company who audits that chart when you're going for a life insurance exam. I like to say it's true, because once you're labeled diabetic, you carry that label lifetime.
Yeah.
I like to piggyback on what Doc said, and I call it lifestyle controlled diabetes. But you have to be vigilant, right? Because diabetes is a chronic disease. The reality is that there are actually populations on this planet where there's virtually no diabetes, at least type 2. And we call those the blue zones. And what the blue zones are there's 5 countries in the world that were originally part of a blue zone project that was published in the early 2000s.
There's one in the U.S.
There's one in the U.S. That's right. Loma Linda, California. But you're looking at the Nicoya region in Costa Rica, Okinawa in Japan, Icaria in Greece, Sardinia in Italy, and then Loma Linda, California. And they basically, in these populations where people have really gone more plant-based, more lifestyle focused, more purpose-driven, those populations, you see virtually no diabetes.
Wow.
You also see virtually no heart disease, and they actually live the longest. So the blue zones are people on this planet that live the longest, 90s, 100s, still keeping longevity, but also tell you why they're doing it too. And it's something that we should be modeling ourselves. And I encourage all my patients all the time to check out www.bluezones.org and try to emulate some of these things. Now they've taken it to the USA, so they have a Blue Zones Project America where they're in 43 states now, and they're trying to say, all right, these 5 countries in the world that have had these ways of not having chronic disease, how can we do what they're doing?
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing project. I think it's fascinating.
You talked about the A1C. That test, is it a test done once, or is it over a period of 3 months, that average?
So we generally run it if somebody has diabetes and I'm seeing them in the clinic, we'll run it every 3 months to see. It provides an average. What the A1C is, it measures sugar attached to the red blood cells.
Okay.
And red blood cells have a lifespan of about 120 days. And so that's the whole idea of like kind of doing it every 3 months to assess what your sugar control has been over the last 3 months.
Are there any distinctions between type 1 and type 2 that any of you...
Before we leave that particular area, let me put this little bit of information in. When my glucose levels were out of control and I wasn't doing anything the doctor was saying, they were taking my A1C every 3 months, and I was on insulin. Now that I have my glucose levels under control, my A1C now is something like 5.7. So I see my doctor get an A1C twice a year now.
Okay.
I would agree with that. When someone is that controlled, you do it 2 times a year.
Right.
Maybe sometimes even once if they're really, really controlled and they have really good lifestyle.
So you're out here living your best life, Uncle Linwood, isn't that right?
Living my
He's
best
getting it.
life.
Yeah, all right.
Going back and forth.
Beep. So do you guys want to talk about, are there any other differences that you want to mention with respect to type 1 versus type 2, or some misconceptions or misperceptions with respect to type 1 versus type 2?
I think the only other thing I would mention is sort of when we talk about insulin resistance, people with type 1 tend to be very insulin sensitive. And it's really important to distinguish that as a physician when you're managing these patients, because I have some patients who are literally on 8 to 10 units of insulin a day. And I have other patients who are on 500 to 600 units of insulin a day. So there can be a lot of variability. And if I give the person who gets 10 units of insulin a day a shot of 20 units of insulin, they're going to bottom out. Whereas that person with 500 units of insulin, it's not even going to touch them. And so, understanding, at least from a medical standpoint, the difference between the two is very important, because we need to manage them differently to manage them safely.
Yeah. I would say.
And there are also 2 types of insulin. There's the insulin that some individuals shoot with every meal, and then there's a nighttime insulin that people use to manage theirs all day. I was taking 18 units of insulin at night, and that's all the insulin I took. And now they even have insulin pumps that you attach to your stomach.
So for us, my daughter takes insulin all day, every day, all night. She now wears an insulin pump. We've transitioned to pump therapy. So I think that's one, to me, distinction is, type 1, you have to have insulin no matter what. So it is life threatening in that if my daughter doesn't get insulin, she can die. So we have to be even more vigilant, and our management systems are really, really important to keep her healthy and keep her alive. So to me, that's really significant. It has, yes, we can have a balanced diet, but at the same time, her diet can be great and her numbers can still be all over the place. And we have to make the adjustment as it relates to insulin.
What other changes has she experienced? Because she's 6.
She's 6.
She's 6. So that's just, it's such a young age.
Yes.
And there's so much vitality in that, they're running, they're jumping, they're playing, they're swimming, they're doing all those things. Can you talk a little bit about what the diagnosis has and how it's impacted her in terms of some of her activities? Have things been altered?
Sure. I think for us as a family, everything has really been altered in that we have to have a plan all the time for how we approach everything. So the first 2 or 3 weeks after her diagnosis, we spent a lot of time putting our first understanding what was happening, and then putting our systems and structures in place so that we can, it's a new normal, but we can live as we were before, just with these systems and structures in place. So I think for her, adjusting to, I have to have insulin, at each meal, I have to have insulin before I go to sleep. And then early on, we would check her often in the night to just make sure that her blood sugar wasn't going too low.
And what do you mean by checking her?
So at that time, we would check her blood sugar through pricking her finger to then put it on a test strip and determine what her blood sugar level was. Now she wears a Dexcom. We're really happy about all of the technology.
And what is that?
A Dexcom is a continuous monitor. So she wears it on her body. So at all times we know what her blood sugar level is. And she has a little monitor that we hang on to, and it also works with cell phones and stuff like that. So that's extremely helpful in just keeping up with what's going on and not having to prick her finger. So that was a little, I can say she's been impressive in terms of her maturity. I don't know if I would have been able to handle things as well as a 6-year-old, but she's kind of like, do what you need to do so I can go eat. Do what you need to do so I can go play. So that's been really, really great that she's responded in that way. And then in terms of her activity, we try to, she does gymnastics and she's playing basketball now. So we have to inform everyone involved that she has diabetes and figure out what's the plan. So for gymnastics, for example, Halfway through gymnastics, we check her blood sugar, and she may have an applesauce or juice if she's running kind of low, so that she can stay up for the remainder of the time that she's in her sport or doing what she's doing. For parties, those are the things that used to throw me off a little bit. We have to know ahead of time, what are you having at a birthday party? Are you having triple chocolate cake, pizza, and ice cream? And then develop a plan and discuss that with her. So she's incorporated in everything. So she goes knowing I can have 2 slices of pizza, half a scoop of ice cream, and cake. Or if it's too much, if it's too much going on with the cake, maybe no cake. But we try to, make sure she's comfortable with what the plan is and knows ahead of time how we're going to address it. And then sometimes we don't know. Folks change food or do different things. So we make the adjustment on the spot.
And I think that's so important. Go ahead.
I want to say something.
Yeah.
I really like what she said in regards to her mentioning the gymnastics, and halfway through, she checked her blood sugar. Being an early diabetic or a late diabetic, at a certain point, you know what foods do to you. If I eat this pizza, it's going to do this to my blood sugar. If I do this, it's going to do this to me. And as you get older, that might change. You know that it once was this, and as you get older, it might be something different. I made the mistake of eating what I normally eat, taking my medicine, and then did a heavy workout in the sun. And
in Houston?
This is in Houston, where it's an average 100 degrees.
Winning.
So I made a mistake. Sun was beating on me. I was, fatigued out of this world. I was doing a heavy workout, and I was outside. I love running. I love playing basketball. That's my, workout. And what it did was, I did not check my blood sugar midway through my workout, midway through my exercise, and it got me extremely low. So the fact that you check your daughter's blood sugar halfway through, gymnastics, where she's getting there, it's all about managing and checking. And that's a great idea. Something that I learned the hard way, where now I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do something extreme, I need to check it midway to see where I'm at. Because what I normally eat, maybe I might have done an unnormal exercise. And that's, not good for me. So I think that's an awesome point.
And Dana,
I've got a friend. He was a marketing representative for Novo Pharmaceuticals, and I thought he was a diabetes expert. But he has gone into a diabetic coma at least 5 times because he's taking his normal amount of insulin, eating his normal amount of food, but then he's walking more, exercising more, and then he slips down below 40 or something, a glucose level of something below 40, and he slid into a diabetic coma. And one time I was with him when he went into a diabetic coma, and I personally thought I was going to see a best friend die. Mm-hmm. And it was all because the difference was the exercise piece that just couldn't factor it in right.
Yeah. I think one thing that you mentioned, the continuous glucose monitor, and I think that that's a very important piece. It's the new technology that we have that really can, one, ease the burden of the diabetes management, not having to poke your finger. We have 2 glucose monitors that come out in the last year where you no longer have to calibrate them, which means you don't have to poke your finger. You just stick and go about your day. And so when you want to check your daughter's sugar, and I think one thing that I wanted to sort of emphasize is you cannot underestimate the burden of taking care of a child's diabetes. It is really, I have patients whose my patients are 20 years old and their mothers are still setting an alarm at 3 a.m. to check their blood sugar. And so having devices like this that ease the burden is really important. But I will tell you this, young children who get diagnosed early actually do really well because it's just sort of part of their life. When you get diagnosed as a teenager, that's a really bad time to get diagnosed because you don't want to be different at that time. Whereas when you're diagnosed when you're very young, a lot of my patients who got diagnosed when they were 5, 6, 7 years old, it just became part of their routine, and they actually are doing quite well. But I think we are really pushing now from our end the use of the technology to make the burden of diabetes a little bit less. Now, insurance companies are not always on board with that, but that's another challenge that we have to kind of go through. But I have found that I do even what we call diagnostic CGMs, meaning we put one on the patients for a week in our clinic. And the amount of information we garner and the way we're able to improve the glucose management is impressive, much better than I've ever been able to do before. So
I want to quickly talk about what the possible complications are of diabetes if left uncontrolled, because I want to leave time and get to the good stuff. But
So
I do want to talk
I'll
about
answer that.
if it's out of control, like what can happen.
So the number one cause of death in anybody with diabetes is cardiovascular. So heart disease, which is still actually the number one cause of death worldwide. So all our diabetics that we see, we absolutely have to screen them. Now I see adults, so we have to absolutely make sure they're that we reduce their risk for cardiovascular disease, heart attack, and or stroke. So whatever kind of testing that they're due for, managing their lipids, getting EKGs if necessary, and doing anything that we can from a very global perspective to go from there. The things that you don't want to get into, of course, blindness, diabetes, very common. I think it's the number one cause of blindness in this country. And actually, by the time that somebody has changes on their retina, the back of their eye, a lot of times those changes are happening before somebody even has symptoms. So it's very important for somebody with a diagnosis of diabetes to get their eyes checked annually with a retinal exam by a board-certified ophthalmologist, but an optometrist can do it, or a retinal specialist. I don't see too many more cases. I don't see a lot of cases of amputations. I just don't see that much anymore. For the guys out there, you probably do. You see more than I do. For the guys out there that are listening to us, erectile dysfunction. Oh yeah. So the guys with diabetes, that's real.
Diabetes, honey.
Yeah. So get that. That's another reason to get your diabetes.
Get your
under
diabetes
control.
checked. Get it under control.
Yeah. So we think about vascular
you can live your
disease,
best life.
but we talk about a complication are either what are called microvascular or small vessels, or macrovascular, some of the larger stuff. So eyeballs, I think for guys, erections, for heart disease for everybody else, amputations and still blindness.
And the kidneys.
Yeah, kidneys. Oh yeah.
So I've got.
And then there's also neuropathy where you get this tingling or sensation like you're on fire or you have an itch or something on your extremities. And some of the problems, I still see amputations. My mom goes to get her hair done, and one of the guys that come in there to get his hair done at the senior citizen committee just had toes amputated. An individual that worked for me had toes amputated. My ex-wife, her father had two legs amputated right at the knee. And one of my brother-in-law, he died of diabetes, but he went blind before he passed away.
Okay.
And that's the reason why I manage mine to the point where when I wake up in the morning, my glucose level can be right in the 70s someplace.
All right.
He's engaged.
All right.
Yeah. And again, I don't have the issues that we were just talking about, but is that stuff reversible, or is it like once it's done, it's done?
Well, you can't put your toes back on.
Oh, you're fine.
No.
I don't think that.
You can't stop. You can't reverse.
I think the other thing is what he meant.
As far as
Talk about erectile
Talk
dysfunction.
about penis.
Never mind. Just
Yeah.
answer the question.
So as far as the neuropathy is concerned, if it's early, then often getting the blood sugars under control may reverse the neuropathy if you're sort of just starting to have symptoms. If it's been going on for a long time, then sometimes it's harder to reverse the symptoms. Kind of the same thing with the kidneys and the eyes. It's if you catch it early, and that's why the screenings are so important. The annual screenings that your doctors ask you to do, want to catch it early and want to treat it early so that we have a chance to reverse it.
And I think that's so important is the importance of the annual physicals, annual screenings. Just as we get older, things don't function like they used to. It's harder to heal, all those kinds of things. And so making sure you get those screens for everything, not just diabetes, but checking with your doctor, developing that relationship and that rapport is so important. And we'll talk more about that as we wrap up. But I do want to talk about managing diabetes, because all of you are managing diabetes and you're doing it well. Chef Tim, can we start with you? And can we talk about food and the importance of diet?
Sure. Like I said before, just moderation with everything. Make sure that you're hydrated, water over everything. What I've learned, and the doctors can hop in anytime, that just more natural juices. I do cold press. I don't do the ones you find in the aisle that are sitting room temp that sit there for weeks. I do kombucha. I drink spring water.
What's kombucha? Are you speaking in a different language?
What
Bless you.
what what kombucha is in a sense is it's a live probiotic drink that helps basically maintain and regulate the system. So things you may eat that have enzymes or whatever, or things that may be in your system that you need to clear out. Kombucha for me has done that. It was very tasty. Not everybody likes it, so sometimes some people take their amino acids other ways. So doing things like that, um, and just watching, like for me, in my weight loss and everything, it was just my sweets. Like I was the big sweet head, and being a chef, that was just horrible because you have access to tons of chocolate and sugar, and I was like, this has to stop. So, cutting back on that, every now and then I might have some, uh, dairy free dessert or something like that, but it's rare. Most of the time, I'm fruit and vegetables. I'm a big guy on kale. I'm a big guy on broccoli. All these greens that can really help keep your body vitalizing and just actually help with your energy. I just I'm the kid in the candy shop when it comes to the produce aisle more than anything, and that just shocks me because I used to be the guy getting all the chips. Um, the burgers, the fries, everything like that. And then now I'm just like, hey, do you have Napa cabbage? Do you have bok choy? And it's just like that actually kind of helped me out as a chef to like learn more about vegetables because then I got to researching and what they do and with ginger and garlic and just it just helps the body out so much. So I tell people all the time, just start looking at the produce section more than anything, and get that water in your system. Go exercise. I work out 4 or 5 times a week. I'm a big power lifter, so I take natural supplements. I don't take anything that's too crazy or anything like that. I'm not one of those guys who does Monster Energy drinks or Red Bulls. I don't need it because what I eat provides its own energy. And so when you eat plant based, you have a more pure energy, and you don't sweat as much, and your sweat even changes its smell. So
you're not stinking.
no, I ain't
Hey.
thinking. No, I'm smelling
Hey.
good. I'm smelling good. Come out of the gym, and I sweat, but it's. I believe that once you eat better, and you clear your system up, you don't just sweat from one place. And I sweat from all over. So yeah.
What else do you all do to manage your diabetes? What have you implemented? Talking to the patients or those who have diabetes or who are parents of people with diabetes, what have you changed? What do you do to make management of your diabetes effective?
Well, I have really cut my carbs. I realized that for women, for each meal, I should have a total of 45 carbs per meal and 15 carbs for a snack. I eat more, but I eat more, but I count the carbs.
But it's quality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I found that to be helpful. And my doctor told me I didn't have to check my blood as often as I was checking it. So that was good news. Because I have poor circulation, I had a difficult time getting the blood out anyway. So I would slap my fingers, run hot water. But as soon as I pricked it, it came out in a clot. So I wasn't able to, get it to flow on the strip. So since he told me I was doing so well, I cut back on that. But then I think I started cheating a little more. So I might have to get back into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, cutting the carbs really helped.
Well, we really just follow our doctor's instructions. We have to see the endocrinologist every 3 months. So, that keeps us kind of updated with what her numbers are looking like as a whole. And we really embrace the technology too. And I think the doctor mentioned that before. We learned how to do everything manually initially, and that's how we managed her condition for like the first four months or so. And then we transitioned to the monitor and to the insulin pump. Both of which she wears, and that's helped so much in terms of managing it in her care, and then just making sure that we watch her diet and keep up with the program. So counting the carbs, you can get a little loose with it sometimes, but we really try to stick with what her ratios are and be consistent with that. So it's demanding. Sometimes it feels kind of daunting, like this is every single day.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel very blessed to have the opportunity to do something to keep her alive and keep her healthy. So we're grateful.
And you're
at
doing
the
an
end of the
amazing
day.
job. I'm just so
Thank
proud of you as
Thank you.
a friend who I've known forever.
I've also eliminated all the low-calorie sweeteners and drinks in my life because, therefore, I don't feel the desire to have a soda, iced tea, lemonade. I drink water. I get up in the morning when I eat breakfast. I drink water. It seems to work for me. Good vodka needs cranberry juice, so I still drink cranberry juice periodically. But I never touch orange juice.
Yeah.
I try when I go to McDonald's, I might get a burger, but I never get the fries. And when I'm exercising on a regular basis, I can cheat sometimes, and I don't get any spikes. I can eat fried rice, or I can eat French fries, et cetera, et cetera. When I'm exercising on a regular basis, and I'm not cheating often, it has little or no difference to my metabolism, the way I'm processing.
I've tried to manage my stress levels too. Like we talk about diet, we talk about exercise, we talk about all that, but also managing your well-being in regards to how you look at life, whether it's job, relationship, whatever the case.
Family chat.
You gotta make sure.
I told you I'd throw that in there. Ooh, it's stressful.
I like it. But yeah, you got to manage your stress levels because that can have a direct effect in regards to your blood sugars. I don't know how, I don't know why, but you got to just woosah it out and just keep doing the regular things, So don't let things overbear you.
Yeah, and I think.
And before we end this session, I want to make sure that we understand that your glucose levels can go up when you experience something like a flu or some type of bacterial infection or something in your body. Your body's doing something that is, your white blood cells are trying to deal with it. Your glucose levels can go crazy, and you just can't manage that.
So what happens in the body is when you are having pain, infection, inflammation, or stress, you actually use hormones that are stress hormones, like cortisol. And these hormones raise your blood sugar. I have certain patients who literally have their blood sugar rise 300 points when they're under extreme stress or pain. And when we control those things, the sugars actually come down. So that's sort of part of that mind over matter in terms of like getting the stress levels down is actually very, very important. If you've ever been put on steroids, prednisone, cortisol is a steroid, and prednisone is an oral steroid. That's one of the things that really shoot the blood sugars up really high. So medications can do it as well. Certain medications can raise your blood sugar. So yeah, I think the sort of the holistic approach, not just diet and exercise, but managing sort of stress levels and trying to keep yourself from getting sick are important in helping with your blood sugar control.
And one of the things that Danielle said was following your doctor's instructions and how important that is. What advice do you have for your patients when it comes to diabetes and listening to you? They're listening now. So what do you have to say to them?
I will say this. I keep it simple with my patients. I say 3 things: move more, eat better, stress less. If you can do that, you're going to be on a pretty darn good pathway. And then if I have to add a 4th one, I say sleep more. But you have to really think about, what are you trying to do? At the end of the day, we want people to be successful in everything that they do with their health, because they know that success in health is going to translate to further success in their life. So I try to tell my patients to keep it simple. We've got your back. We got a team there. We haven't talked about actually diabetic educators, which are great resources to have in the office. Certainly in my practice, we have a diabetic educator on site. But we want people to take advantage of those resources. If they have questions, ask your physician. Start there. Ask your primary care doctor. Who do they know? What resources do I need? Get involved with things like Facebook groups, or listen to this show tonight. Yeah. Spread the message to everybody.
Share the show
because we want you all to do well. And so
message.
But I think if you keep it simple and just know that, hey, you're going to get through this and we're going to be successful, I think that's the best way to start out with.
That's awesome.
I think the other thing that I really focus on is sort of customizing the plan, meaning everybody kind of has different stuff going on in their life. You have a sick parent that you're taking care of. You have four small children at home. You have a job where you work long hours. There are medicines that make you pee out the blood sugar. Well, if you're in a job where you're driving trucks for 14 hours a day, that's probably not an ideal medication for you. If you're a teacher, it's probably not an ideal medication for you. So, I think one of the things that we really spend some time that I go into detail about is what kind of work do you do? What are your hours like? When are you sleeping? When do you eat? What do you eat when you're eating? What kind of other stressors are in play here? Because in reality, I think everybody has different stuff going on, and we have to kind of figure out how to target where your problem areas are. One of the benefits of having people check blood sugars at different times is knowing when their blood sugars are going up. Sometimes they're only going up after a certain meal. Well, then we only need to target that one meal. We don't need to really up all your insulin and then have you bottom out. So I think customization is one of the things that I also emphasize.
I think it's also important, and I don't think you can underestimate the importance of support. And being in a community environment, whether it's an accountability partner. Danielle's married to my good friend Dell. They're a Spell House couple, and I think having a good partner and somebody to navigate pediatric diabetes type 1 is very important. Having a walking buddy, having an accountability partner, cooking with somebody, and cooking healthy meals. I think that all leads to just better results. You're not out there on your own on this diabetic island by yourself. You've got people who are cooking with you, who are engaged with you, who support you, who want to see you live your best life for a very long time. And so I just think that that's so important. And just one thing to not underestimate, because that can make a huge difference. I think there's a lot of people by themselves out there going through diabetes or other diseases. And when you commune with other people, you overall just yield better results.
Yeah.
I want to thank you all for joining me. This has been an amazing,
Thank you.
An amazing show. I've enjoyed laughing with you, but yet and still, there's some major gems that we've shared tonight, which I think is so incredibly important. I want to thank our sponsors for tonight, the Homecoming Challenge. Once again, www.homecomingchallenge.com, Social MVP, socialmvp.com, Veronica's House of Glamour, 630-995-2320, Sandy Hernandez for fabulous makeup, 630-750-0198, Jill Whitwer, personal stylist. She put the red bottom on my boot, 630-400-8827, Janille's Bling Things, premierdesigns.com/Janille, JENILLE Ray Design Company, Custom Home Design, 773-354-0740, and Brazilian Queen Hair, lashes and hair, www.brazilianqueenhair.com. As I said before, the Homecoming Challenge episode is in its last week on Naperville Community Television, and that just means we've got a new episode coming next week. It's a super exciting topic. Although the Homecoming Challenge is ending on Naperville Community Television, we are just getting started with our season. This is our Go Back, Give Back campaign. This is the time whenever you go back to campus, give back to students, pour into students, tag the Homecoming Challenge. We just want to spread the word about our organic mentoring program for college students. We've got a new episode, like I said, coming next week on Naperville Community Television. Tune in next week. We will be live on location for the radio show next Wednesday. We are doing a topic that I think is very relatable, a huge part of the human connection, and we are talking about grandparents. Everybody has them. You will be one day if you keep listening to your doctor's instructions. And it's going to be a sweet show. We've got grandparents and grandkids. We've got a great sponsor, and we're going to have a great conversation about grandparents. It's going to be a fun show. August 28th, that is my 100th episode. Today is episode 97, and I'm super excited about our 100th episode again. We will be live on location at Boulevard Kitchen and 500 Station, which is in Aurora, just past Naperville. But we're going to have a great time. It's a networking social, so please come out from 6 to 8. You're going to meet a lot of great people who are out here doing their thing. Connect with them. exchange business cards, bring a ton of business cards. And after that, we are going to go into my 100th episode, which is my first actual live studio audience. We'll have a panel, and then we'll have other people in the audience. So it's my first live studio audience. So come and heckle. Don't do that. But please come out. We're going to have a great time. It's going to be a lot of fun. Finally, Toni Morrison passed this week. There's been a lot of things going on in the news. And she was just such a force. I mean, I could go on, but we're running out of time. But I just want to read a quote that I think is so important. And she said, "I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you have so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else." It's a main tenet of Dana being Dana, pouring into others, the human connection. We're all related in some form or fashion. And that's what my show is all about. She was 88 years old. So rest in peace, rest in heaven, Toni Morrison. We love you. We love the impact that you had. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you for sharing the show. We're coming for diabetes. And together, unified front. Expect more experts and my friends and family. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I do not promise to be an expert, nor do I have all the answers. I'm just Dana being Dana. Good night.
Night.